It's Sunday, it's tea time, let's start the stream. Hello friends and welcome to the stream. I see we've already got a few guys already on board. So hello to Cal Animates and Maria. Welcome on board. If you want to say hello in the chat, come along and join us, say hello, see if you let us all know that you're there. One sub with no videos, hi, nice to see you. Raw Broccoli, welcome back. Let me just close down a few windows before we start. Try and keep the stream at the right pace. Epic Gamers, hello. Welcome. Chester, groove-tastic to you too. Certainly is. So, welcome to the stream. So what are we doing today? We've got a few things in mind, but that could all change, of course, depending on how things go. So I'd like to share a couple of videos with you first. Absolutely one sub, they're all visible. Yes, I'd like to share a couple of videos with you. And I've got two questions that were sent to me on Discord that I'd like to have a go at answering. One of them is to do with complex character rigs, and I'll briefly chat about that and show you a small demonstration. And the other one is about animating a character from Among Us, which I'm really looking forward to doing later on today. I'll also answer any questions you've got, if you find them through on the chat as we go through. Hi there, Daryl. Welcome, Philippines. Great to have you with us. So do find any questions through on the chat as we go along, but if I miss them, then just pass them along later on today, and I'm sure we'll catch up with them at some point. Just keeping an eye on the chat, making sure everyone's got a chance to get involved. So we're streaming today on Twitch and on YouTube. So the platforms are there on the screen. Feel free to change if you get a better streaming experience. And let us know which platform that you're watching on and why it works for you. I'll be quite interested to know which one works best. And do subscribe to the YouTube channel to not miss out any future streams, and to follow on my videos that I release once every Friday. You can catch me on all my socials. I'm on Facebook and on Twitter, where I share videos, tutorials, news, and interesting animations and animation tips that you might find useful. And if you want to help out the channel, you can always treat me to a coffee or a Darren tea. And today, I've got my tea in my Jack Skellington mug. So I'm enjoying that with you today. I'm guessing, Maria, that most people will be on YouTube, as that's where you'll get notified most easily. And I've not been on Twitch too much, but I've been on there occasionally. So there's a few people that follow me on Twitch and prefer watching through Twitch. So I'm interested in which one works for you. It's a big mug, Broccoli, because it's a big stream. We've got a lot to get through today. So let's see, what do we want to talk about first? I think what I'd like to do first is to mention last Friday's video, in case any of you missed it. Let me just bring it up on screen. Here we are. So I know that mostly the subscription seems to work for YouTube, but not everybody gets notified of when a video is released. So I thought on these streams I'd mention the latest video that I released. And this past week, on Friday, it was how to create a vector trail. And it does more or less, Maria, yes, it's pretty good for that. I do like a warm or hot tea, so it'll keep me going for a while. So the idea of the vector trail is to allow you to draw trails of pictures, and in this case I wanted it to do a trail of the confetti coming out of the box. And rather than drawing each one individually or just displaying them randomly on the page, I wanted to have a kind of flow to show them moving in a direction, so I created a vector trail. So I thought I'd also show how you could do that for your own images. So first off, I showed how the vector trail worked and how you could use it. There we go, to show a line of motion with different drawings in each frame. And then I moved on to show how you could do it with a larger image. For instance, here I've got Dwanko the dog. And I imported him in a vector trail to draw him in a straight line, which you can also use any of the drawing tools to draw him in a curved line, or here in a rectangular shape using the geometry tool. So this was last Friday's video, so do take a look at that if you missed it. Soda pop, bit of Earl Grey, nicely done. You can't use vector because Tahoma crashes, says Raw Broccoli. Presumably you can use raster and smart raster, I'm guessing. That's peculiar that it's just vector. Have you set up your graphics card to accept Tahoma as to have a 3D option? Because that can help a lot of crashes for some people. Because there's so much good stuff in the vector level type that it's worth trying to figure out if you can get them working. If you can't, that's really unfortunate because it's just so useful. I'm always mixing the 3 different level types, and I keep telling people to try all 3 level types to learn the difference between them and why you might want to use them. Excellent, Gag Hacks. That's good news. Yeah, for some people it makes a difference. For others it doesn't. Depending on your graphics card, or if you've got a built-in graphics chip on your laptops, you might not be able to set it. And for those people, Tahoma and OpenToonz can still work smoothly. So if you can set it, and it might help. Yeah, Linux is a Linux build of Tahoma. So if you can download and use that, anybody, that'd be really great. And then report any issues or bugs if there are any on the Tahoma site. There should be a link in the help menu for reporting any bugs just here. So if you've got any information or feedback for Jeremy, then do file that back through. And speaking of Jeremy and Tahoma, that was the next video I wanted to share. If you're not following Jeremy on YouTube, he's got a YouTube channel where he shares information about OpenToonz and now Tahoma. And he's just released another video yesterday, I believe it was, where he details some of the new features in Tahoma. And he covers mostly a lot of what I covered, was it last week or the week before in the stream, where I covered over the new features in Tahoma 1.1 beta, with a new version of 1.1 coming out soon. So if you haven't seen that, it's definitely worth taking a look at this video and subscribing to his channel. So here he's showing the perspective guides, and then he shows how you can draw lines with them and with all of the other drawing features on the brush tool that's been added, and the fill options and a few other features in there. So that's well worth taking a look at. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I've got a link down below to that video so you can take a look at that later on. Just reading a comment there by Maria. Excellent. Yes, I've always said since it first came out, it's definitely worth taking a look at Tahoma, even if you use OpenToonz and are very happy with it and very comfortable. There's a few extra features in Tahoma that I think make the program slightly better than OpenToonz. There's plenty of extra bug fixes. It's being released more often, and it's just a more comfortable program to work in, with the interface being tidied. So I definitely recommend everybody takes a little look at it at least. So I'll move that off, but as I say, the link is in the description, so take a look at that when you can. Sodapop's asking, wondering if the vector fill options work with the frame range colouring. That's a very good question. I'm not sure if they do. Let me start up a new project and have a quick look at that while we're here. Create a new project. Now we can always come back to this project with any other questions that pop up. So if I create a vector level and use the brush tool, and if I tick auto close, auto group and auto fill, that means that when I draw a shape, the line will be closed to the start point of the first line and it'll be coloured in that colour. So I'm guessing the question is, can you do this with the frame range options on the right? Possibly. Let's try it. So we'll turn the frame range options to linear, which means that the spacing of the drawings will be equal between from the first frame to the last frame. And just by the fact I can select it from the drop down, I'd like to hope that it can. And as I often say for OpenToonz and Tahoma, if you wonder if something can be done, just give it a go, because you might be surprised. For instance, when people ask, how can I get my images into OpenToonz that I've drawn in other programs, all you need to do is drag them over onto the program from your Explorer view, and they can be added. So if you give that a go, you'll find that works. The same's true for audio files. So let's give this a go. So we'll draw a square on the left, and that's marked in red. As it happens, I've used red, but that's a good sign because that shows normally what the drawing is on the first frame of the frame range that you draw. I'll do that again in a second. So then we'll move to the last frame. So I need to insert some blank frames first. There we go. And on frame 19, if I draw a triangle. So let's look at those drawings from frame 2. Yes? Yep, that works. So to make that a bit clearer, I'll change the colour to blue, and we'll start at the bottom here, and I'll draw, what should we draw? We'll draw, let's go for another rectangle. You'll notice that as soon as I let go of the cursor, the line turns red, and there's a cross to show the starting point of where you need to start from. And this is important to be able to interpolate accurately. If you need to have the lines drawn in the same direction so it can be interpolated. So on the last frame, we'll go from a tall rectangle to a small one, starting at the bottom left of the next drawing. So on frame 19, we'll draw across the bottom, up, left, and down a bit to match the first drawing. And the cursor automatically goes back to drawing number 2. Yeah. As often happens with the automatic interpolation, it doesn't necessarily get the image that you expect to have on every frame, but it can often be a very good start and at least a placeholder of where you want to find the drawings. So the answer is yes, that does work. It's really good. Okay. So the next thing I want us to look at. Hi there, Fuzzy. Welcome to the stream again. Good to have you back again. And as I said earlier, if I do miss any questions, do pop them into the chat later on so that I don't miss them. I will try and come back to them if I can. But I've had 2 questions from the YouTube channel, from the Discord channel early this week. And if you want to ask questions for the following stream, then do pop over to the Discord, become a member, and you'll see a questions for stream channel, and you can pop them in there. And by doing that, it'll give me a chance to prepare and get ready for the next stream. Okay, so there's things happening in the chat. Hi Sword of God, Tutorial Zone, welcome. Gaghacks asks, can you also tell me how to keep the files when we download the new version? I'm guessing by files you mean your projects that you've drawn, your animations in Tahoma. It really should be quite simple because those projects you normally create outside of where the program is. So if I open an Explorer view and just show you where my Tahoma is. Okay, so I downloaded Tahoma and I created a folder called Program Files Local and then a subfolder called Tahoma. And this is, you can see here, I've downloaded quite a few copies of Tahoma over the past couple of months. This is my latest in the Tahoma folder. So that's an unzipped version that I run. There's the program that you run. But when I create an animation project, I don't create those in here. So I can delete this folder at any time I like. I actually create them, as you may have noticed a second ago, in my Documents folder in a subfolder called Tahoma. So if I delete the well, it's not really an install, but if I delete this download, the unzipped file, then I can just copy over the next version and not worry about those projects. So that keeps them safe. However, there are some settings that I like to have for each version. And you'll notice here, I've got a settings folder. And all I've done is I've copied my stuff folder in here. So I've got a copy of some macro effects that I use. And in the library, I've got the styles that I use for the vector trails. And then in the profiles, I've got my particular settings for shortcut keys. So I've set a few shortcut keys different to the standard. So all I've got here is inserting a frame, removing a frame, rotating, resetting the rotation to flip the horizontal and vertical axis, the screen picker tool and the RGB picker. So then when I install a new version, I open this up and just copy the stuff into the same stuff folder. Yes, I'm afraid it is about organisation. I mean, when you install a new version of Tahoma, you don't need necessarily a copy of your old settings, but because I've changed a few keyboard shortcuts and things that's personal to me, it just makes it easier because I'm installing quite a few new versions. Once you've installed a version of Tahoma, you may not update it for a few months, so you might not necessarily want to keep a copy of your settings. So it's not necessarily that important, but the main thing is when you create animation projects, create them away from where you run the program so that you can delete it and not lose those. Okay, so we had a question early this week on the Discord server from Master Mind Blowing, asking if there's a way to do something that is seen in a video but in Tahoma or OpenToonz. So let me bring that video up, and it is in a new program called NV2D. So if I hit play on that, basically it's a facility for creating a rig to animate your characters, and they demonstrate it here where they're moving the character left and right, and they move their eyes and eyebrows up and down and the eyes around like this. So the question is, can we do that in OpenToonz or Tahoma? And the simple answer is kind of, but do you really want to? So kind of, I'll demonstrate in a second, but the important thing for me is, do you really want to? I'm not sure how much these rigs help you and save time. So Gaghags is asking, what are rigs? And rigs are ways of putting your character together so you use controllers to move parts of the character and you don't have to redraw each time. So let me show you quickly if I create a new scene. So often you might draw a rig. Let me create a vector level here where the body is, here we go. Let's draw oh, I've still got the frame range on, so let's turn that off. Try again. So your body of the character is drawn in one column, and you have the head of your character, which I'll just make a different color over here, drawn in another. Okay, and then in other columns you will have your legs and the arms. There we go, nice sausage arms, and facial features, and you connect them together on the stage schematic, which is this one here, and you connect them so that the body, which is column 1 here, is then connected to the head. So column 2 is the head, and that's normally connected to the table, and you connect it there, and then the arms and legs are connected to the body, and to the head you connect the facial features. And that means if you use the animate tool on the body, so if you move the body from the left of the screen through to the right, the head and arms and the rest of the body move with it because they're connected as part of the rig. But you can do more than just move them together. If I change the center point, again using the animate tool, by placing it on the neck area, I can then rotate the head like this on the body. So you can make the animation up by drawing once and then making the change frame by frame by changing these controllers, and you can build up an animation without redrawing the whole of the character. So that's the character rig. And that's really handy, particularly if you're not great at drawing or consistently drawing the same character. You can quite quickly build up an animation. Yes, it's very useful if you can't draw gag hacks. If you enjoy perhaps tracing or using a reference to draw a character, that can be useful to be able to put it inside a rig and still use it to animate it for personal projects. As I've said often on the channel, you should really use reference a lot. Feel free to use reference as much as you like, but tracing shouldn't really be used for anything you produce publicly that people believe is your own work. So be careful how you share any tracing. But for personal projects, just animations on your own, for a bit of fun, maybe for birthday cards, as I've seen people sharing on the Discord channel, it can be a useful tool to do. So here, I took a look at that video and tried to work out how can we use a kind of rig to help with the animation of this. So I tried to replicate a little something that was in the video, and this is taken directly from the documentation. So if you go to OpenToonz or Tahoma's help menu and go to the online manual and search in there for expressions, and there's one example in here of how to make one column affect another. Tutorial Zone. Hi there, I didn't recognise the name. So you can make one expression, you can make an expression that makes one column depend and change depending on another column's value. And it's quite complicated to set up, and I don't think you necessarily get that much benefit from it. But I was intrigued as to what you could do after the question that came in, so I took a look. So again, that link will be in the YouTube description down below if you want to take a look at that. But it's just in the standard help documentation. So I drew a quick sketch of a head shape, and on a separate column I added a control, which is just a column with a circle drawn in it, just so there's something visible that you can get hold of. And by using the Animate tool, if I go to the column with the red circle in, I can click and drag that, and it can affect the column of the head moving. So the head always looks at that circle. But the problem is that if you get too close, move this too close, it doesn't necessarily work. It's the angle it moves at is too sharp. So it can be useful to do that, but you can just use the Animate tool on the actual column itself and adjust the rotation directly. So I'm not sure if that necessarily helps, but it's something that you can do. And I'll show you that quickly in the FX spreadsheet here. So if I show the head and the control column in the function editor and right click on the column folder, and I can say show animated only, and that hides some of these other options that we're not animating. And you can see on the head column I've set the rotation with a key, and I've added the expression in the bottom here. And this is the same expression that was taken directly from the help menu, from the help page, except I've replaced column 3 and column 2, which here we've got for the head and for the control object. So it uses the right column values for that. And that just means that when you adjust column 3, the control, then column 2's rotation of the head will also be adjusted. So it's a little bit complicated to set up, and I'm not sure of the benefit you get. But I did a second scene to try and emulate a little bit of what was in the NV2D video. So I've drawn this quick face together here. We just zoom into the right level. In fact, if I go to the 2D view, it might be easier to see with all the other controls. Okay, I can't move the page, which is a bit peculiar. There we go, it's running slowly, I think, or something. Okay, so I've done the same thing here. So I've created a column for the main head, one for each eye, or at least the pupil of the eyes, and then a control column that's at the bottom of the screen here. And it's further down, if I can just move this. Try to go to the hand tool. Here we go. So it's right down here, the red circle again. Okay. So if I go to frame 1 for that and choose the Animate tool and move this control, what I've done is I've aimed these two eyes at this control, so that when I move that control, the eyes move to face it. So what you can do is on frame 1, for instance, you can have the eyes. If I can get this, it's really struggling to keep up at the minute. I suspect it's because of all the windows I've got open. So let me try closing a couple of those, see if that helps. Okay, so yeah, on frame 1, we can place the eyes over here. If I move to frame 9, we try moving them to there. Frame 16, place them at the far right. Okay. So now if I play the animation, the eyes move from the left to the middle to the right. play that slower. So it's one way to animate, but for me it's just as easy, and in fact it's more controllable, to actually move the columns themselves. Building a rig can be useful, but having a control, not necessarily so. So I hope that answers your question a little bit. Hi there, Enyo-san, how are you doing? What I'm up to today, well, I've got a couple of questions to answer, and I'll be doing some animation shortly. I'll be doing a run cycle for the Among Us character, which I've not had a go at yet. And that was a request by one of the Discord users. I suppose so, Maria, kind of like a movable root, but it's controlled by the expression that you put into the animation interpolation. So it's a peculiar thing to use, and I suspect with a bit more work and a bit more understanding, especially mathematical understanding, you can get a lot more out of it, because the way the control affects the columns is based entirely on maths for rotation and for positions. So you need to understand that a little bit more. So I'm sure that somebody that understands that can get a lot out of using this method. But for me, I think using a rig is useful, not necessarily the controls. Okay, so I'm going to restart Tahoma. Just to make sure everything's cleared out and it runs at a better pace, hopefully. Yes, Soda Pop, motion path. I was looking at this early on today, actually. And I think I'd like to take a bit more time looking at it before I bring out the video for that. But absolutely, I intend to put out a video. I think it's so useful having the motion paths. I was considering demonstrating a little bit of it today, but I think I need to learn a bit more about it before I do, to make sure that we get a better, clearer picture, and I don't just bumble through, making mistakes, not necessarily finding the most efficient way through. But at some point, absolutely. No, rigging is quite useful, Broccoli. It really, really is. And you don't have to build a complete rig every time that you want to use a rig system. So in fact, it's probably best not to build a complete rig. So for instance, you may notice my little Darren T head popping up on the screen now and again around the place. He is part of a larger rig of the whole body and the head. But I do sometimes just import him, as I did for these videos, and use the animation that I put in there to animate his eyes moving as he does. Oh, there he is, just to the side there. To animate his eyes moving and the blinks happening, and also a head turn. So they can be useful in their own place. Because you don't need to, as Maria's talking about, all of the columns, you don't need to build every single column for every situation. But it is useful to be able to know how to connect columns so that one column will affect another. So in a very simple sense, if you're building, say, perhaps a computer screen showing a simulation in a sci-fi story, you might want to have a solar system with the sun in the middle and then planets moving around the outside. But then having all of that moving to the side potentially. So you'd want the rotation of one of the planets to be attached to the sun, so that when you move the sun, the planet still moved with it, off to the side. And likewise, the planet itself may have its own moon moving around it. So it's definitely worthwhile learning how rigs work and how to connect columns together. So if you've got any other questions, do fire them through to the chat. Otherwise, we'll be starting the next section, which will be looking at the run animation for the Among Us character. So Ukuman, apologies for the name pronunciation, is asking about are there any better features for file sharing or collaboration in Tahoma compared to OpenToonz? Right now, Not really, no. The only change has been with the project file. And if I open up an Explorer view, and I'll show you that. So if I go to the, I'm on the separate screen at the second, where's the test stream? I'll look at this one here. This is fine. So if I bring this in, this is the expression project we were just looking at. In here, there's a Tahoma project XML file, and that name stays the same wherever the project is, and however you rename the project. So the project name is Look at Expression, and you can easily rename that folder and it still works. But in OpenToonz, if you rename that folder, you also have to rename the XML name. So that's a little addition to make it slightly smoother for working with Tahoma's files. But for collaboration, there's no additional features in there to help. I guess the core idea of the file system in OpenToonz and Tahoma is that each file, or at least there's many files created for a project. So for a vector level, there's a separate file for each one. So potentially, if you're working on different drawings, you can easily share the files and email them to each other and pass them around with each other. But that's kind of a manual file handling again, not something that's built into the project itself. Yes, Soda Pop. The tracking tool, you're right that nobody mentions it. That's because most people don't know how it works, and the people that do know how it works don't really like it. It's not necessarily great. Again, that's something, a feature that's been on my list for a long time to make a tutorial for, but I've not so far. I keep thinking I should, just for completeness, so that we've got a video out there, because occasionally people ask how it works. But I've not found a need to use it myself, so I've not had to get into the full intricacies of how it works. And for those that don't know, the tracking tool is down here somewhere. I believe is it this one? We cancel that. Yeah, the tracker tool. And from what I've seen, the intention is that you can import a video, and it could have a character walking from left to right, and you could place a marker on his foot on the left, and then again on the right, and you can track as he moves across the screen. But I need to look into it more, and that's something that perhaps I'll get to at some point. Yes, Tom, sharing files and collaboration over Git would be great for version control. And I guess it's worth mentioning there is actually version control in OpenToonz and Tahoma. If you go to the Preferences window, you'll see a version control tab that you can enable. But that, I can't remember what version control tool that uses, but that uses a tool that isn't Git, and it can be a little bit tricky to set up. But if you've got teams working together, or even just a group of friends working together, it might be worthwhile using. And as the message says, take a look at the user guide for details. And I know that Rodney, if you've come across him in the Discord server, he set it up a while back and tried using it. And once it's set up, apparently it works quite well. So it might be worth something to look at. Ah, thank you. Subversion is what it uses. Okay, I've not used that. And as I say, I know it was tricky to set up for him, but once set up, it worked quite well. So maybe have a go sometime. There's a question here from Aha. Okay, can I shed some light on the lip sync process in Tahoma? I've made a few videos on lip syncing, which let me just show you where they are, and perhaps you can take a look at these later, but I will show you something in a second for it. So if you go to my channel and then go to the video playlists, bring that over here. Okay, so I've got the playlist here. You'll see a lip syncing playlist. Which has a number of videos to describe how you can do lip syncing. And some of these I believe I demonstrate in OpenToonz, if not all of them, but it works exactly the same way in Tahoma as it does in OpenToonz. So if you take a look at those, and I show how you can use Papagayo to help set up your lip sync, how you can use a program I've developed called Riot, which is rhubarb into OpenToonz, which automatically works out the beats of the lip sync and automatically sets that up, so you haven't got to manually work out where the lip sync is. However, for both of these, you will want to do some adjustments when it's in OpenToonz or Tahoma. But I believe I show that in the video, so do take a look at that. I've got a video here where I've applied the Riot program to the whole of this video. So there's 10 minutes worth of lip sync shown with my character in the corner, so you can see that running. And then manual lip sync, which is what you might do a lot of the time, especially for smaller pieces of speech, because it's not worth setting up Papagayo or even Riot necessarily if all your character does is turn around and go, "Hello, how are you?" or whatever. So you want to learn how to do the manual lip syncing. So I've got a few techniques in there. And then the last video is where I show the level strip and how you can use it like Keyframe Caddy. So if you come from a Flash or Adobe Animate background, you'll know how Keyframe Caddy works. And the level strip is quite similar to that. So you basically, from the panels menu, you open the level strip, and that shows you all of the drawings you've got on a level. Hi there, Shades of Glory Art. Welcome to the stream. And if I go to panel settings, I can toggle the orientation so the drawings go from left to right, which you might be more comfortable with from Keyframe Caddy, but also it might just fit better in the layout of your screen. So basically you have one column with the character's face in, and then a separate column with the different mouth shapes, and you draw up to 10 different mouth shapes, usually what people use, and then you can simply drag from the level strip into the timeline to put the right mouth shape at the right time. So that's a quick look at lip syncing, but do watch those videos, they explain it in much more detail. Hello there, Belgium. Caligulero, welcome. Okay, shall we move on to the second question? That's right, Soda Pop. Jeremy did say he was going to look into rhubarb to actually include it directly into Tahoma 2D. I don't know where he is in that process yet, but keep your eyes open, and as soon as I hear about it, I'll let you know. But as I said earlier, do follow Jeremy over on his YouTube channel, and I'm sure he's going to share details there. Okay, so let me go to the starting pop-up, and let's create a new project. Okay, so this next question came from GagHacks that asked if we were doing a live stream, could I demonstrate doing a run cycle for one of the characters? And he mentioned that he hadn't seen a demonstration of the run cycle anywhere yet. However, we did find one. Just here, I've got it on the screen, from Crown Prince. Let me bring that over. Who had a video on how you can create a run cycle. And again, I'll have the link to this down in the description. So if you're following this on YouTube, you can see that to watch it later. It's only 5 minutes long, 6 minutes long. So here's the run cycle that she's demonstrating. And then I'll keep this on screen, on the second screen for myself, because basically she says there's only 5 different drawings that she used as part of her animation, and the run cycle itself is only these 4 drawings, and the 4 drawings are actually only 2 drawings but duplicated for each leg. So there's this drawing on the left, number 1, and number 3 are virtually the same, and 2 and 4 are virtually the same. So let me move that off screen. There we go, that's better. So I've got some notes here of how I plan to do this. So I think what I'll do is I'll start with a sketch layer, as I always do, and then I'll redraw this afterwards in a vector layer, or a vector level, sorry. So if I create a standard raster level, and let's use the pencil tool again, just because I like it. Okay. So if you have any questions about this, either pop them in the chat now, or wait till we're finished drawing in a short while, and then I'll try and get to answer them as soon as I can. So first let's draw the body. And it's a very simple sausage shape. So around top, comes down, and around bottom. Yeah, that'll do. And then there's the eye visor thing here. Then on his back, he has an oxygen tank. Something like that. Okay. So then we want, as I said earlier, we want 4 different pictures showing the 4 different movements of this. So to do that, we'll extend out the single drawing so it covers 4 frames. Then we'll click and drag over the 3 blank frames, and then we'll choose to create duplicate drawings. And I'll do it from the context menu, or you can press the D key. So now I've got 4 slightly different drawings. So we can draw differently on each one of those, and it won't affect the others. Okay, so let's draw the legs on here. So I'll start off with the leg coming down. And they're quite chunky, something like that. With the, I'll have this as the left leg, so let's erase the body here, and then the right leg is just curled up underneath the back. Like that. And then drawing 2 is where it's running forward, so the left leg continues to go backwards and the right leg is going forwards. So I'll turn on the onion skin. So I'll do the right leg first, so it's at the same level, sort of as ground level. So that just comes out somewhere around here. And add that curve in that they've all got. So I've got this little bit of a curve coming off, and that's the back leg, and then the left leg is shooting outwards. So that's something like that. Oops. It's quite big, but not that big. So we'll raise that. And if you're near your computers and can run Tahoma or OpenToonz, then do try and follow along either now or later on the recording and share them over on the Discord channel. I'd love to see your versions, see what you can do with this. Make that leg slightly bigger. Okay, and then drawing number 3 is the same as drawing 1, but the legs are in the opposite position. So drawing 1, the left leg is straight down. Drawing 2, it's come back. Drawing 3, it's going to be curled up to come forwards, and drawing 4 all the way forwards. So if we go to drawing 3 here, and then we copy drawing 1's position, and this had the left leg at the front, but now the left leg is at the back. So we'll cut into the body there, continue that, and it doesn't need to follow exactly the previous drawing. Something like that, and then the back leg is in the straight position on the ground. And drawing 4 again is a copy of drawing 2. So drawing 2, sorry, had the left leg here at the back. So drawing 4 has the left leg at the front. So we'll trace that over, and as this is the left leg, we'll cut into the body a little bit and erase the body there, so we can clearly see it's the left leg. Make sure the body is covered over here, and then the back leg just comes out like that. So let's reduce the FPS down to something really low, say 6, and hit repeat playing. Okay, so that's the main 4 drawings. So the way this character runs is that when the foot is on the floor, the character is actually on the floor, and as soon as he moves his foot away, he jumps into the air. So these drawings, the character has to be in the air. And I had a quick look earlier, and after following the video from Crown Prince, I've got notes here. The character is in the air for 3 drawings. So we'll extend this drawing, number 2 and number 4, so it lasts for 3 frames each. And for each of those 3 frames, we want the character to be in the air, but at different positions. So we need to duplicate that drawing. So we've got 3 different drawings of the character in the air. So I've highlighted those 2 blank frames on frames 3 and 4. I'll press D to duplicate. So now we've got copies of 3 and 4. I'll do the same at the end for 7 and 8. So now I've got 8 frames, and 3 of these are exactly the same. So what we want to do is return on onion skin so I can see where the previous frame was. And for drawing 2, I use the selection tool, highlight the whole character, and it needs to move up into the air by quite a lot. Click away. Let me just choose the eraser and remove that line on the leg. It's just distracting me a little bit. Do it for all 3 of those drawings. Okay, so drawing 2 is up in the air. Drawing 3, he wants to be slightly higher, so that shows some ease in as he gets to the peak of the jump. Drawing 4, it needs to be slightly lower, so virtually the same height as drawing 2. So let's take a look at that for drawing 1. So he jumps up and then goes up a little bit and down a little bit, then lands. Then same again, drawing 6, turn on onion skin, he wants to go up quite a lot. And if you look at drawing 2, you'll see how high. Yeah, that's about the same, that's fine. Drawing 7, he wants to go up but slightly higher again to ease into that peak. Drawing 8, slightly lower as he's falling down, ready to land. So we need to increase the speed, the FPS, show them a little bit more because we've got more drawings in there. And if we hit repeat play on that, change the speed to make him go quicker. Yeah, so 12 FPS for 8 drawings. That's about the right pace, I think. So I can see he's moving slightly left and right. So let me just take a look at that. No, it's okay there. And it's these drawings here. So let's look at it compared to the previous. That one is moving over slightly. Number 7, same again. Just to line that up. And then 8. There we go. Good. Let me just check over onto the chat for a second. Colligero Gigante asks, why so many forks of OpenToonz? You're right, it would be good to have just a single version of OpenToonz, but the problem is, or the reason is, that different people have different priorities. So I know that one of the major customers for OpenToonz, even though it's open source, are the animation studios in Japan. So what the studios need from an animation software isn't necessarily what we need as hobbyists from the animation software. And I believe that's really why Jeremy created Tahoma 2D, so we could put in the features that work for us as hobbyists, and to do things like change the interface to hide parts of the interface that we don't need to see but are very useful for the larger studios. So the interface for us is a much simpler version of the interface. Plus OpenToonz itself is released either once or twice a year. Even though you can download nightly builds with bug fixes in and extra features, you haven't got to wait for the full version. And if you want the link to that, you can take a look on the Discord. I've got links to all these features over there. And Tahoma 2D is being released every one or 2 months to get the features and bug fixes out to us much quicker. And also, the Tahoma, Jeremy's philosophy is to try and make the software work for us, the user base. So if you have any feedback about this, you can contact him directly on the Tahoma Discord, or you can comment in the Tahoma groups on my Discord. He also hangs around there, and he intends to try and listen to as much feedback as he can to put in the features and the tweaks that make Tahoma work for us. So that's one of the reasons why Tahoma's there. And there's also the Marevna edition, which I think was created for a similar purpose, to try and create features that they want to use for their projects that isn't necessarily the features that are needed for the main OpenToonz for the larger studios. So you can download the Marevna version to work separately if you want to, but all three are based on the same core code and have the same core features. For Tahoma, I'd say 90–95% of the features it has are the same as OpenToonz, but just presented slightly differently. But you're right, yes, the main program kind of does get diluted a little bit, and it's hard to know which version to use. And in some ways, it doesn't really matter which version to use. As long as you get into the community and hear about the different versions, so if you came in through the OpenToonz route, as I did, and as a lot of people have, now that Tahoma is out, I recommend it a lot for new users and new animators, so you might decide to use that. Or you might stick with OpenToonz. It's kind of your choice, really. I think Blender has more money behind it, in the same way as Krita is also brought up as a similar sort of a project, that there's more funding behind it to pay for developers to work on the two projects, compared to OpenToonz, where everybody that works on it outside of the main guy are doing it totally, entirely free of their own volition, just to try and make a better product. Okay, so now I've got the sketch of the character moving. I'd like to create the neater lines, which I'll do with vector. So I'll create a new vector level. And because there are only 4 drawings, even though 4 actual drawings, even though there's actually 8 drawings here, I'm going to draw just 4 drawings, and then I'll move them in the same way as I did for the sketch. So let me take a look at this and get the line set right. So the first thing to do, as often when you change tools, if you've not used them for a while, or if you've used them for a different project, is to double check on the options toolbar. So many questions come in from people that have problems with the drawing tools. They say, I can't fill, my brush tool doesn't draw, or other issues. And that's often because you've got an option set on the toolbar. The frame range is a classic one. If you've got this set, when you first draw, as I showed earlier, you'll find you get a red line, and then that will disappear if you try and draw again, because it needs to work over a number of different frames. So have a glance over your toolbar, and now I need to turn off the autofill and auto close. I'll leave, no, in fact I won't leave the auto group on, that's part of that. I was thinking I might leave it on for filling, but I think I'll actually do what I did the other day, and I'll fill on a separate level. So let's get this size right. So we want the same size for both minimum and maximum lines, I think. Let me type in here 5. Because it uses quite chunky lines. Yeah, let's try that. Okay. So let's zoom in and redraw this character. In fact, for this one, I will auto close to ensure the line completes at the end. Let's look at the smoothing. Yeah, I've got some smoothing on. Accuracy 100%. Good. Let's give that a go. Oops, that was drawn a straight line then. So I'm trying to draw 4 slightly curved lines. And because it's vector, I can go to the control point editor, of course, and edit these afterwards. Or delete any that I don't need. Okay, let's continue with that. I've got auto close on. So let's try again. And going from the sketch phase to the final line phase, don't feel that you need to trace the lines precisely, because the sketch phase was just there to work out the timing and the rough positioning of your character. So unless you want to have 2 or 3 phases where you sketch first and then you do a neat sketch and then you trace, feel free to avoid the lines a little bit to make it look a nicer picture. And I won't do the oxygen tank on the back, because the oxygen tank moves at a different pace to the main body. So we'll look at that in another section in a second. Okay, so that's fine. I'll make a small adjustment and bring that line back. We might adjust these lines again a little bit more if necessary, but for now, let's just get them drawn in. Okay, number 2. And again, let's join that together. Didn't like that kink at the back, so let's try again. And then draw this leg. Now that's there, we can complete the line of the body and the foreleg. Okay, and if you remember, we copied this drawing for drawings 3 and 4. So I'll do the same thing again. I'll extend that across those 2 frames, highlight drawings at frames 3 and 4, press the D key so I get a duplicate, and then I can use the selection tool, select this drawing and just move it upwards that little bit. And drawing 4 is actually in the same position as drawing 2 anyway, because if you remember, we eased in to drawing 3, and drawing 4 is ease out for the drop. So that's fine. Number 5. And again, if you're having a go at doing this animation, do share them on the Discord server. I'd love to see them. And thank you to Gag Hacks for suggesting drawing this week. The plan for the stream this week was going to be to continue with the run cycle that I started last week with the monster in it. To add some in-betweens and to draw the actual Nita monster shape over the top, possibly with ink and colour. So I might do that next week, but it depends if I get any other questions through the Discord this week. So if you have any questions I've not answered today, or any larger questions that I might need to look into to be able to present the information clearer, then do pop over to the Discord and share them on there. And the final drawing, and you'll notice because I've got the smooth on, that as I do each corner, I'll start the line and wait until the line catches up to the cursor until I start the next part of the line, so that I get 4 distinct line shapes. If you don't pause, you can often get more rounded edges as the line drawn struggles to keep up. Okay, let's get this last leg done. No, that's not quite straight enough. Let's go from the other direction. Good. And because this is vector, you could easily have just duplicated the drawing and then adjusted one of the drawings for the other positions. But as it's such a simple character, I thought I'd draw each of them. So again, for this final drawing, we want 2 duplicates. So we'll highlight frame 7 and 8, press D, and then on drawing 7, I'll highlight it and move it up a little bit. So it goes up and then down. Let's take a look at the onion skin, make sure I'm not moving it to the side. It's a little bit, so let's move that over, in fact, up a little bit more. Okay. So let's turn off the sketch layer and see how that looks. Not bad. I can see the shape changing slightly at the top. So let's take a quick look at that. So yeah, so drawing 1, it starts off rounded, then it goes a little bit quirky. So let's have a quick look, see if we can change that. Just bring that down a little bit, just to round it off on each of these 3 copies. So this is one of the huge benefits of drawing with vectors, that you can adjust the line after you've finished drawing it. Good. And now if you'll excuse me for 1 minute, I'll be right back. Hello there, I'm back. So let's do a couple of jobs there. Hi there, Skeptic Dev. Welcome to the stream. No, Tom, I'm not using the tape tool today. I'm not worried about my lines joining up together, because I'm going to actually do the colouring on a separate level. Hi there, Tony. Happy Sunday to you too. Thanks for joining the stream. And I mentioned earlier that last week's stream, I drew a walk cycle with a little monster that I was going to continue this week, that I'm now going to continue next week instead. But that was based on some sketches and animations from Tony Geddes, who's joined us on the stream. And if you're interested in OpenToonz, and especially in raster sketching and animating, then Tony is the man to watch, certainly. And if you wait there 1 second, I'd like to bring up his channel to share that with you if I can. Because it's certainly a channel worth watching. And then we'll continue with this small animation. Just finding it in my list now. Here he is. So again, I'll pop the link to this down in the description, so you'll see that in the YouTube description later on. But do take a look at Tony's channel. He's got lots of animations of these little cute little monsters, so it's well worth a look at. All done in OpenToonz and possibly Tahoma. I'm not sure if you're onto Tahoma yet, or if you're still working in OpenToonz, Tony. Okay, so we've got the clean lines of this character, and now I want to do some colouring. And I've always had problems with colouring on vector levels. And there's things you can do to make that easier. And I've actually made a video about one of those ways to make it easier. But I don't think I'll follow that today. I think I'll do the easy technique today, which is to create a totally separate level, which I'll do in vector again. And I'll place it behind the neat lines. So let me label these columns. So I've got an ink column and a colour column. And what I'll do is I will actually use one of the new features of Tahoma, which is the auto fill and auto group feature. So I'll turn those on. So let's take a look at the colours that I need to add in here. Okay, so the character I was looking at, if I bring this onto your screen, is red with his darker shadow, and then with the visor of a glass kind of colour and a reflection in there. So I'll follow that kind of style in here. So we'll add a new colour, just choose the normal bright red colour, but as it's a vector level, we can always change the colour later. So brush tool selected, and I'll make the line quite small, so maximum of 1. And because the ink lines are at the front, I can draw anywhere along the line and it'll fill it in. So if I just draw around here, following the thicker ink line, avoiding the visor, although you can actually go over the visor because then we'll have the screen in front of it. But I'll go around to keep these sections separate. And because the auto close was on, the line was joined up to the beginning and it was auto filled. Now if I turn off the ink lines, you'll see that's actually what I drew, and that's what's sitting behind that ink line. So I'll go through on each of the cells, and I'll do the same thing with the same colour, and then we'll come back and do the next colour separately. So let me just draw over here. And I'm not doing the whole body because we've got the shadow to add into it. And don't forget, if you do go over the line in any way, you can always come back, because this is a vector level, and adjust it with a control point editor. So don't worry about being too neat, but the neater you can be, the less work there is to do later. And in fact, I'm colouring in these drawings here separately, but because these 3 drawings are the same, I could just press the D key to duplicate it, and then using the selection tool, I can bring it down using the keyboard to put it in place. Okay, so drawing 5. And then 6 in the air. I'll try and be as neat as I can, but I don't want to go too slow. Again, I'll duplicate those two because otherwise it'll be quite dull watching me. So let's try and keep the pace going. Okay, so those last two duplicated and they fit just fine. So then we'll add the next colour, which is the shadow colour. And when you press the plus key, it adds a new palette entry with the same colour as the one that's selected. So it's the same red colour. So we want a darker one. So I'll change the value slider. And if you're just running Tahoma from the first download or haven't made any of these changes yet, when you first look at the colour palette, the colour panel, you won't have these top three sliders. I find them so useful, in particular these two, the saturation and value, to make colours lighter and darker. And you can bring them up by clicking on the lines at the bottom of the colour palette and choosing HSV. And now you've got the extra controls to adjust the colour. So this one we want darker for the shadow. So I'll make it quite a bit darker for now. And we'll come back and adjust it if we need to make it different to match the colour better. So again, using the brush tool with auto close and auto fill on. The actual shadow is kind of a sweeping curl like that. And then everything below that is in shadow. So we just draw over both legs in a single motion, and then that's the shadow on top. And again, 6, 7 and 8 are just copies of each other. So using the selection tool, I'll press S to select it. I can choose this one selection of colour, then press Control C, move to drawing 7, Control V, and then using the arrow keys I can move it up, select that again, move it up into position. And the reason it didn't work was my cursor has to be in the viewer area for the arrow keys to move the selection. If it's in the timeline area, it moves the cursor on the timeline. So again, from drawing 7, I'll select by just clicking on that coloured shade area, press Control C, go to frame 8, Control V, and then leaving the pointer in the viewer area, I'll press that down arrow key and place the shadow in place. I can see it hanging over, so I need to move it up a little bit. Perfect, great. So back to drawing 1, and let's draw this shadow again. So let's see how high it was. So just above the leg, that kind of a sweep. So I missed the bottom of the leg here, so I'll adjust this slightly to bring the shadow over there. Drawing 2, sweep, and we'll take a look at how close the shadows are to each other to make sure they don't jitter too much as he runs. Although he does run quite fast, so I'm not going to be too concerned. And again, this drawing is the same drawing for 3 held frames. So selection tool, select the shadow, press Control C, go to frame 3, press Control V, and then arrow keys to move it up and left, and then drawing 4, Control V, and that should be in the right place. I can see it's over the edge there slightly. So using the control point editor, I'll move those in. If I grab the white squares. Drawing 5, which I think is the last one. Sweep, and then round the edge. Like that. So let's just see how that looks. Yeah, that's reasonable. So finally, we'll do the visor. So again, we'll add a new colour, and it copies the same red colour. And we want this kind of a blue glass sort of a colour. So we pick the blue. It's kind of a pale. Yes, that's not too bad. So drawing number 1, let's draw that. I think that's reasonable. Let's add the shadow area, again just by pressing the plus, and then we'll move the value to be darker, and this has got a sweep like that across one corner. If anything, that may be slightly too much, so let's again go to the control point editor, which is mapped to the C key. And I've got a shortcut for that on my tablet because I use it quite a lot when I'm working with vectors. Just to make that a little bit smaller. And then going back to the normal colour, I'll press the plus to get a copy of that normal colour, which will make lighter by dragging the value to the right and possibly the saturation down. And again, let's draw a little bit of light reflection on the top. Didn't like that, let's try again. Okay, that needs to be a little bit lighter. Good. So I'll use the selection tool this time, and I'll select all three colours and we'll copy and paste them onto the other drawings. So just draw around where those three are, and it highlights all three colours. I can right click, which is a useful thing to do, and choose group. So now the three colours are one solid object, so I can't accidentally move one of the three colours away from the others. I'll press Ctrl C, go to Drawing 2, Ctrl V, and I'll come back and place them in a minute. And I'll do that for each of the drawings. And then using the control point editor, well, first the selection tool, we'll place this roughly in the right place, and we'll adjust it afterwards if necessary. So using the vector selection tool, by clicking, you've got to be careful where you do click to make sure that you select in the right area. And then when you drag, be careful you don't click the outside widgets to resize the selection. You have to be inside it to move it. So just move the last couple here. Okay, so let's take a look at that and see if I've missed anything off. Often you'll get so engrossed in the details that it's not until you play your animation you realise that you've actually missed drawing something for one frame or colouring it in. So let's just see how that is. Nice. Okay, so the last thing to do on this is the oxygen tank. And the oxygen tank is quite interesting because it doesn't move with the character, it's got a delay. So when the character jumps up, the tank moves afterwards, and then the character falls, and then the tank comes down with them. Yes, so I've not been looking at the chat for a while. Sorry about that. Let me just catch up a little bit. I see a question there from Enyo-san that's been answered already. Thanks, Sodapop, for that. Is there a way to change the stacking order in a group? Yes, there is. To change the stacking order, you can just right click, and so if I select an object, you can right click and choose move to front and move to back. Or if there's multiple layers drawn, you can move backwards one layer at a time. But these three are all grouped, so they're now one single stacking order. But if you wanted to, if I ungrouped them, I could then change one of the colours and bring it forward or backwards against all the other colours. So there's a stacking order within a single drawing. So great question, and I hope that answer helps. So what I'll do on the oxygen tank, I'll create yet another vector level for this. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, don't be afraid to create multiple drawing levels even for a single drawing. Particularly for backgrounds, you'll really want to use multiple levels and multiple columns, and use them in the same way as you use layers in a drawing program. So at the back you might have this sky layer, then in front you might have mountains, trees, the house that you're working with, and then the path on the ground just in front of the viewer, so you can easily edit one of the layers. And in OpenToonz and Tahoma, editing the levels in the column is exactly the same thing. So here, this is going to be the tank. And I'll draw this using the auto close, so I'll be able to fill it in the same colour. So let's choose the size, which was either 5 or 6, I believe. Let's draw a line and see. In fact, turn those options off for 1 second. Yeah, that's the same size. So auto close, auto group and auto fill. Great question, Maria. I'll show you that in a second. I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do with that. Your answer is yes, you can do that in the schematic, but I'm not going to. I'm going to use the sub-scene option, or in OpenToonz parlance, the sub-X sheet option. So let's draw the tank like that. In fact, I don't want the auto fill because I'm going to fill it in red, aren't I? So draw the tank coming out the back, going down and up there. So I've added the tank column behind the other columns. So if I turn those off, you'll see it's a solid shape, which I can now fill in red. But on this vector level, we haven't got the same red colour. But if we move to the colour column, we can click on one of the colours and we can choose to copy it, which you can right click and choose copy, or the keyboard shortcut Control-C. But I want both colours, so if I hold hold Shift and select both colours, I can then press Control-C, move to my new level for the tank, select in this panel and keep the cursor here and press Control-V. So now I've got those two colours exactly the same in this level. And you can link them together by sharing them in the project palette, but I won't do that today. But I will just quickly pop that up here. If you click on Studio Palette from the Panels menu, you can put your palette in the project palettes list so that it's used within this one project, or in the global palettes list to be used for any project in Tahoma or OpenToonz. But I don't need to do that today, so I won't do that. So we'll fill in the tank using the bright red colour, and then using the brush tool with auto group and auto close on, I'll paint on the shadow slightly higher than the character. In fact, let me change the size back down to 1 to make it easier to draw in that thick black outline. I didn't click on autofill, that's okay. Just choose the fill tool and hit fill. And now we can demonstrate what we were talking about earlier, all being well, where if you select on the colour, the dark shadow colour, I can right click and choose, hopefully move backwards. Got move to front. Undo that. Should be a move backwards option in there. That's not showing at the minute, but as you can see here, to move forwards, you've got Control and the right square bracket, or just the square bracket. To move backwards, it's the left square bracket. So let me just try that, see if that works. Let me try it with the red colour at the back. I've just realised what I've done. Because I used the fill tool on the red area, so this is quite interesting. I think we can fix this quite easily. So let me show you how you do this. So basically, this level, if I hide the ink lines and the colour for the character, the level, tank level, has two options, two items drawn on the level. We've got the black line with the light red fill and the dark red shadow. So what I need to do is I choose the fill option and choose the transparent colour. I can unfill that line like that, and then using the selection tool I should be able to move this behind, move to the back. I can move that now behind the black line like that, and I can draw on a separate drawing the light red of the tank. So I'll choose autofill and I can draw around that area. The rest of this blank area is behind the character, so that's fine. If we need to make it filled any larger in any way, we'll do that separately. So again, using the selection tool, I can select on that bright red colour and choose to move it to the back. So now it's behind the line and the dark red. So again, there's 3 drawn areas here: the black line, the bright red fill, and the dark red shadow. And if we bring the character and the fill back, that now hopefully looks a little bit neater. Okay, so we need the animation of the tank moving up and down. So again, we'll extend the tank drawing up to drawing 8. I'll highlight the 7 copied drawings, the 7 extended frames, and then I press the D key, which duplicates the tank. And now I can use the select tool and move the tank up and down independently of the character. So as the character goes up, I want the tank to move up, but not quite as far. And I'll use the selection tool and the cursor keys, so I only move it up and down and don't accidentally move it left and right. So let's move that a little bit. So you can see it moving up a little bit. Drawing 3, I want it to move to the very top. So if you remember from the first drawing, the tank is at the center of the eye mask level. So that's where it's headed to. The next one, the character's falling down, but the tank is still moving upwards. So I'll use the onion skin so I can see where the tank is on the previous frame. And I'll place this a little bit higher. The character's falling again for number 5. And that's where I'll do the peak here. So it's 1 frame behind at the minute. We'll see if we'll adjust it later. And I can see there where the fill isn't quite in the right place. But I'll, again, once we've got the position of this, we'll adjust it later. Number 6, the character moves up, but this tank needs to move down to the same place as the first drawing, I believe it was. Oops. Get rid of those onion skins. So it moves up, and it comes down, and this still wants to come down to the bottom. Okay, and then 7, it wants to start moving up again. Back to 1. So let's see how that looks for the spacing first. It's a little bit messy, so let's just take another look at it. Move off the onion skin. So drawing 1, character goes up, that starts to go up. Reaches the peak here on 3. So the tank should reach its peak on 4. And then start to fall on 5 as the character falls. And then land at the base on 6 as the character starts to go up. And then moves up. But number 6, I think that's just far too low. And then 7 wants to be up a little bit there from 6. And 8 needs to be up again. So the first thing I want to do here is to fill in the tank to make sure that the fill is entirely visible there. So I'll change the transparency, the opacity of the character, so I can see exactly what I'm changing. And I use the selection tool, the control point editor, and we'll adjust the fill of the shadow to better match where it is on the tank. And then I'll hit save. Save early, save often, as Dave says. And I'll delete a couple of these points because I don't need them all. The fewer points, the better, and the easier it is to edit the drawing. So if you'd had a choice, you would actually have changed these before you duplicated the drawing of the tank. Oops. There we go, accidentally deleted that. So I'll hit save again, just in case I do the same thing again. So I'll delete that point, delete that, and then move this over. So now the fill of the tank should be fully behind the character. So I'll move the opacity back up. And then if I zoom out a little bit, I might see how he looks a bit easier. And there's a small jitter and pause in the playback here. So to get away from that, we'll use the preview window, which should play a little bit smoother, hopefully. And bring down the play rate to 12 FPS. So the height difference between the left and right step is quite significant here. So that's why it looks different. So we'll adjust that to make sure it's right. So on the ground, we want the tank halfway between where the visor is. So that's on the ground, then going up, it moves with it, and then falls down. That should be down a little bit more, I think. Selection tool, using the cursor keys to bring it down a little bit. And then that's down quite low. Okay. And there's the peak where it goes up on drawing 7, frame 7. So let's look at where it is on frame 3. That's virtually the same. So let's place it in the same height. And then 8 should be the same place as drawing 4. So again, let's follow that same pattern. So it should be 4 drawings behind. And 4 in front here. Let's see how that looks. So it's moving quite a lot, but I think that's pretty good. That's right, Tom. Secondary animation is exactly what we're after here. I'm not sure if that's moving too much. What do you think, guys? Can you let me know? If you let me know in the chat what you think for the movement of that, if the backpack, the oxygen tank is moving too much, or if we should move a little bit. But I think I'm happy with that. So I might do a little background, just something, a vector gradient or something, to have something behind him, maybe a ground. I might do something for that, and I'll share that later on Twitter and Facebook. So do look out for me on there and on the Discord channel. I will do gag hacks, absolutely. I'll be sharing this on the Discord server. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. I think you're probably right. It might need to move a little bit, but I won't do that while we're on the stream. I'll do that when I come off, but I will share the results of that, so keep your eyes open for that. And if you've drawn this animation, do share it as well with the team. Let us all know what you've done and how you got on with it. And if you used any different techniques for drawing or for filling, then let us know that also in the Discord server, so we can see how you did it, to see if it's any different to how I've done it, and to check out the results. So I'll adjust that slightly later, but one thing I'd like to show you that I believe it was Maria asked about earlier is for animation for this. Would I connect all 3 columns in the schematic to move them? And you can do that, but what I'd actually do is I'd put them into a sub-scene in Tahoma. And in OpenToonz, it's called a sub-X sheet. So you highlight all of the columns, and I will include the sketch, just so that that's not left here on its own. So I'll select one column, and holding Shift, I'll select the last column, and then right click and choose Collapse. And provided I selected all 4, which I don't think I did, so I'll press Undo. So I'll try and click and drag. There we go. Over all 4 columns. Then right click and collapse. So now here on the main timeline, we've only got 1 column showing that animation. But if you want to make edits, which I will be doing, then click on any frame in this column, and on the toolbar here there's a button called Open Subscene. So if you press that, and it expands it like it's a folder to show all of those columns. So I can now continue to edit on this column inside the subscene, and then when I've finished, I can press the button to the side of it, close subscene. And now I've got a single column to work with, and I can add animation keys over there. I can repeat the drawings, and I can add a background. So let's label this. Among Us Joe. We'll call him Joe. So just to show a few of those options that I talked about there is animation and repeating the run. So what I'd like to do is have the character start at the right hand side and then run to the far left hand side. So I want to repeat this, and the easiest way to do that is highlight the 8 drawings, right click, and then choose from Edit Cell Numbers the repeat option. And that opens this dialog, and you can tell it how many times to repeat. So if you know you want to repeat 2 times or 3 times, then you can enter that. Or you can type a frame number. So if you want this to repeat for a certain number of frames or certain time, you can put in the number in there. So I'll have this repeat 5 times for now, just to start off with. And I'll hit repeat. And now I've got that repeated 5 times. So I'll extend the play range to play over that 5 times. And then on frame 1, I'll choose the animate tool. I'll choose the all option, which allows me to change all of the animation settings at once. So I'll move the center point onto the character. There we go. Then if I click outside, anywhere outside here, I can move the character to the side. So I'll move him off screen, and hopefully by the last frame, I want him to have run across the screen off to the left. So I will tick the padlock to the right of the X value, which means that as I drag, the character won't move up. Let's get it right. The padlock to the right of the Y value, because I want to move him on the X axis and not on the Y axis, which is up and down. So now when I click and drag him, it will only move left and right, and I can't move him up and down. So it will definitely run in the same direction on the same plane. So we'll take a look at that to see if I've got the right number of steps in there. Let's hit save first and then play. Just taking a look at the chat here. Yes, Maria, collapse is really much simpler than schematic. For this sort of situation where you definitely don't want to adjust the columns separately, like you might do in a rig, collapsing them into simple subscene is just easier, and it allows you to work with just one column for a character. And by doing that, and once you've learned to do that and got used to being comfortable doing that, you're then more tempted to create more columns to build up your character, which makes it more easily editable. As I say, after the stream I'll go back and I will edit the character within this subscene, but all of the animation frames and anything else on the main timeline here won't be affected by it. So you can still work in different stages, either editing a character or working on the scene. Okay, so that animation, moving from right to left, I'm not sure the interpolation used. I think it seems to slow in and slow out at the end, but I can see that by going to the timing room, and if I open up the folder for the character and click on the X option, that shows the two keys on frame 1 and on frame 48, and if I click anywhere between them, it'll show me the interpolation. And as I thought, it's using speed in and speed out. And I actually want the character to move in a linear fashion at the same pace at the start and at the end. So I've changed that here to linear and click apply. Or alternatively, you can right click on the white line on the timeline, and from there you can change the interpolation. Now I can choose speed in, speed out, ease in, out, or exponential, but it's currently set at linear, which is where I want it, so I can now see the pace of the character running across. And I'm in a different room, so the FPS is changed again to 24. And in fact, I want this at 12 FPS, so let's change that now for the scene. And that's from the level menu. Let's get it right. The scene menu, scene settings. And change the frame rate here to be 12. And while I'm at it, let's change the background colour, even though I am adding a background, so that it's got a white background if I render it before I add a proper background. So now at 12 frames per second, let's see how that looks. It's not too bad. I might make it a little quicker. So all I need to do for that is to click on the last key, and I'll drag it to the left a little bit, and I'll leave the play range where it is. There'll just be a gap at the end. So let's see and press play on that. That's okay. And if I change to the camera view and change the opacity to show only the camera view and take a look, that's pretty good. So now that's all set up. That's the run cycle moving in one direction. Let me quickly add another couple more. And the first thing I'll do is I'll go to the preferences screen, and on the animation tab I'll change the default interpolation to be linear, so the next time I make an animation of him moving, the interpolation will be linear. Okay, so I've got him moving to the left here, then I want to have a small pause, and then I want him to move again to the right to run across the screen. So what I'll do is I've highlighted those 8 drawings, I'll right click, edit cell numbers, repeat again, and I'll repeat it. I repeated it last time 5 times, so this time I'll repeat it a little more, maybe 8 times, because I want him running to the right and further back on the screen. So he runs to the left, there'll be a small pause, and then I want him to run to the far right. So on this drawing, I want to change the animation. I'm going to change the zoom, the scale, to make him smaller. I also want to change him facing the right. So you can do that by adjusting the H value, which is the 100% of how wide he is. And if you make him, if you make him 50% wide, he'll go smaller, to 0% where he'll be invisible, and then negative numbers expands them out in the opposite direction. So simply by changing 100 to minus 100, it makes him face the opposite way. And I can place him further back if I turn off the padlock to the Y setting. Let's place him, if I can click and drag. He's having difficulty selecting him today. There we go. Back here, make him even smaller. So from this drawing through to the end, I'll have him running to the right. So let's place him next to the screen. And then again, the timing will work out shortly. So go to a later frame and we'll lock Y and drag him all the way off the screen to the right. So let's see how the pace of that works. It's not too bad. And I think we'll have a gap from when he comes on. Oops. Okay, this is one issue. That's great. I'm glad that's happened because I can show you what you need to do to fix it. So because on frame 49, I flipped the H to be minus 100, I hadn't actually set the H value before that. So we can set it on the final frame, so frame 38 of the last drawing, and put the H at 100 and click away. So then before this, it'll be facing to the left, and then it'll change to face to the right to come back in there. Another thing I changed was the scale. So I changed the scale back to 100%. And the last thing to change was the Y, that even though I did lock it here, make sure that's the same value of 95, minus 95. Ah, that's right. So it's moving to the left, but I can see it moving in a curve. So if I go to the timing screen and start to show some of these values for this column, so if I click on the folder to show them all, I can then right click and choose show animated only, and that removes all the columns that don't change. So I can check the interpolation easier on each of the columns. So as I thought, I did change the column X to be linear, but the Y column was still set on speed in and speed out, which changes the values even though it starts at 95 and ends at 95 on the first run. It still changes the values between the two. So if I click between those two keys, change that to linear and apply, it now stays at 95 throughout. So let's go to the camera view and hit repeat play. So he runs across at the front, and then he runs across smaller at the back. And I might need a small gap at either side to give him time to turn around and come back. So I'll do that by going at a frame, selecting a frame between the end of the first run and the start of the second. And I'll choose the insert key option, which is what I showed you at the beginning that I've added a keyboard shortcut for. And if we go to the level menu, let me just find this. No, it's under scene, isn't it? It's insert frame to insert a frame across all of the columns, and then remove frame removes a frame across all the columns. So Control Insert. So if I hold Control and tap Insert, you'll see the keyframe moves across, and so do the drawings I've selected. So let's just add a few frames for a small gap, and the same at the end when the character runs off screen. We'll add a few frames after the key. Let me bring the timeline over so you can see, just to give us a small gap. So drag the playhead over, and then we'll take a look at how this looks. So you can see the rotation there on the left hand side, but if I turn on the camera column, so we only see the camera view, fit to window, you can see in full screen. I think it could probably move quicker at the back actually. So let me bring that end key closer to the left and then see how that looks. Okay. Okay, so that's all the animation I'm doing for today on this. I'll take a look at the oxygen tank offline and I'll add a background for this and then share the animation on Discord and on my other socials. Yes, Tom, I'll take a look at the timing while I'm offline and I'll get that at a better pace to run at the front and at the back. As you say, at the back he would run a bit slower and take more frames to move across the screen, so we'll take a look at that. That's right, yes, relative to what I've got already. So I'll share that later on. But I think that's all for today in the animation. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you've got any more questions, if you want to fire them through, and I'll hang around for a few more minutes before we go today. While you're adding any questions you've got, as we were talking about collapsing columns into sub-egg sheets, it's been really useful to do so for a single character. And again, as I said earlier, for a whole background. So you may have multiple columns with different levels in to build up the background. And it's handy to collapse that into a single column. But you can also do it just for organisational purposes. So you may have 2 or 3 characters that you can collapse into a single unit. And you may add animation frames to move them or not. It's just a way to break them down and to remove them off the main timeline to remove clutter. Hi there, Chester. Hope you've enjoyed the stream today. And if any of you missed any of the stream earlier, it has been recorded and it will be on my YouTube channel straight after the ending of the stream. And then later on tonight I will go in and add some timestamps so you can take a look in the description to jump straight to the section that you're interested in. So Maria's asking about getting more variety and softness in vector colouring, getting it more similar to a raster type. Is it possible? Yes, I think is my answer. So it's not yes, it's yes. So I think what you're referring to is vector drawings often look like Flash drawings used to look. They had a certain style to them where the lines, the inked outlines were drawn very crisply, and the colours are very solid colours, quite cartoony. But with raster drawings, that's standard raster and smart raster or Toonz raster levels, you can apply more of a texture to them, especially if you're using different brushes. Let me just pause this a second. And if you're using a vector level, let me just step into here so you can see one. You can add a new brush and choose the vector brush. So you may not have looked at these yet, but you can change the outline using the vector brushes. At the bottom here, in the vector brush list, if I turn these all 3 off, so showing just vector brushes, you can change the outline to be not just a smooth outline, but it can be textured in some way. So if I change the line for this character by choosing one of these, you'll see you can apply a bit of a texture to the line, so it's not just a plain smooth line. And this could be appropriate to give you a bit more of a, as you can see here, a scribbly view, as though you've drawn it with a pencil or a crayon. So they're worth experimenting with. And if I zoom in, you can see that it also ends up leaving gaps around the edges, as you would have if you'd drawn a line manually and coloured in with a pencil. You don't always go up to the lines. So that could be quite useful. Also, you can see the glass colouring has gone outside the line, so it doesn't just keep it inside the lines. So it's worth experimenting with, and take a look at some of these to see if they're useful. So that's for adjusting the lines themselves. As for the colour, if I choose the generated option, in fact, let's turn this one back by pressing the first option to turn off the override. You have got a few fills here that you could use that can apply a different kind of style to the fill. But I don't think it's quite got the same texture that you'd have with a raster using one of the raster brushes from the raster tab. I'm trying to think how you might change the fill. If I go to the fill column, and then for the red colour, let's click on a couple and see how they look. Most of these affect kind of the outline in the outside. So there's one for a checkered look, but both colours are red. So if we change one colour to green, you can give them a checkered look. Or you've got an outside colouring here. That's an offset fill, which is quite useful for a certain style of cartoon where fills are sometimes offset from the main line. A bit of an outline with brush strokes to give you a bit of character to the side. And for all of these, do click on the settings tab. So once you've selected one, you can change how the effect looks in here. So here you can change the density of the lines, the angle of them, and the length. So you can add just a bit of subtlety around the edge, or have quite a lot in there. So you can use those to add a bit of... That's okay, Soda Pop. Great to see you today. Hope to catch you next week for the stream. So you can adjust these to try and give a different texture to your fill. So that could be worth experimenting with. The first of these generated options are only for lines, not for fills, so they won't affect anything. But do click around the end part of the list here and see if you can find something that gives you the sort of fill that you're after. And the gradient fills are two of my favourites, so it's worth pointing these out. If I choose the linear fill, linear gradient first, choose two different colours between these two. Okay, let me get a much different colour to that, so make it perhaps white and green. Here you can see the difference between the two now. And then change the smoothness and the angle to show where the two colours are. So I've put the white at the top left, and then add a bit of smoothness, and then change the green to be a darker green. You can see how that affects it. So you could use a bit of a gradient perhaps as well. Yes, that's true, Chester. He suggests the vector alpha level. You can change that above a raster background. So exactly right. Actually, I'm really pleased you brought that up. In exactly the same way as I've added a colour column and a colour level to do the colouring, instead of that, you could easily just add a raster level and do the colouring on the raster level behind the lines. So you literally have the raster colouring features that you were talking about earlier. So brilliant, thank you for bringing that up. No, Tom, unfortunately those parameters aren't animatable. It would be great if they were, but right now they're not. So you set them on each colour palette entry. And it's important to realise they're on a single palette entry, so if you create a duplicate or a second one, you can actually have different settings on that second palette entry. So you could simulate an animated version by having one colour with one set of settings, and then partway through the animation change to fill with a second palette entry of the same colour but with different settings. Let me just undo that a little bit and see where we get to. I did save before I started making these changes, so I can just close without saving and I won't lose any of my changes. So let me hit undo. And then now it's not responding. So anytime Tahoma or OpenToonz says it's not responding, don't click anything, wait for the screen to come back, and usually it's okay. There we go. But if you click on the screen or try and do anything else, often it'll crash. So if that happens, just pause. So being it's doing this, when it does come back, I think I'll close it and restart it, just to clear out any problems it may have in its memory. I did hit save earlier, and I do say save regularly so you don't lose any of your changes. I discard the changes I made because I was editing the colours. And now we'll find out if I really did save or not. So are there any other questions before we go today? If not, it's been great to have your company with me. I hope you've enjoyed it and learned a little something maybe, and hopefully you can join in and have a go at doing your own run cycle with the Among Us character and share it with the rest of the group. But that's it for today's stream. So hopefully I'll see you next Sunday when I'll be back. I'll have another video out next Friday. And until then, keep animating, keep using Tahoma and OpenToonz, and that's a guarantee. Have you always wanted to animate but didn't know how to start, and software seemed expensive and difficult to use? Well, with OpenToonz, it's free, powerful, and once you know how, it's easy to use. And it's my mission to get you animating with it today. Hi, my name's Darren, and I've been teaching OpenToonz for the past 3 years, showing thousands of students just like you how easy it is to animate with, and cutting through the jargon to show that anyone can animate with it. And by the end of the course, you'll be able to animate traditionally using OpenToonz. And the course is designed for students brand new to OpenToonz, as well as those new to animation. So take a look at the free lessons I've offered below, and then why not sign up and join me animating traditionally with OpenToonz.